The Kura-Araxes culture, or the early Transcaucasian culture, was a civilization that existed from 3400 BC until about 2000 BC, which has traditionally been regarded as the date of its end, but in some locations it may have disappeared as early as 2600 or 2700 BC. The earliest evidence for this culture is found on the Ararat Plain, thence it spread northward in Caucasus by 3000 BC. Altogether, the early Transcaucasian culture enveloped a vast area approximately 1,000 kilometers by 500 kilometers, and mostly encompassed, on modern-day territories, the southern Caucasus, northwestern Iran, the northeastern Caucasus, eastern Turkey, and as far as Syria. The name of the culture is derived from the Kura and Araxes river valleys. Kura-Araxes culture is also sometimes known as Geographic, Karas, Pulur, and Yannick cultures. It also gave rise to the later Kerbuk-Karakwer culture found in Syria and Canaan after the fall of the Akkadian Empire. Early history. Shulaviri Shomu culture preceded the Kura-Araxes culture in the area. Yet there were many differences between these two cultures, so the connection was not clear. Later, it was suggested that the Sioni culture of eastern Georgia possibly represented a transition from the Shulaviri to the Kura-Araxes cultural complex. At various sites, the Sioni cultural layers can be seen as intermediary between Shulava-Shomu-Tepa layers, and the Kura-Araxes layers. This kind of stratigraphy warrants a chronological place of the Sioni culture at around 4000 BCE. Nowadays scholars consider the Kartli area, as well as the Kakatai area, as key to forming the earliest phase of the Kura-Araxes culture. To a large extent, this appears as an indigenous culture of Caucasus that was formed over a long period, but at the same time incorporating various foreign influences. There are some indications of the overlapping in time of the Kura-Araxes and Uruk cultures. Such contacts may go back even to the Middle Uruk period. Expansion. Rather quickly, elements of Kura-Araxes culture started to proceed westward to the Erzurum plain, southwest to Cilicia, and to the southeast into an area below the Urmia basin and Lake Van, and finally into the present-day Syria, and as far as Palestine. Its territory corresponds to large parts of modern Armenia, Azerbaijan, Chechnya, Dagestan, Georgia, Ingushetia, North Ossetia, and parts of Iran and Turkey. During the early Bronze Age period in 3000–2200 BC, this settlement was part of the Kura-Araxes phenomenon. At Arslantepe, Turkey, around 3000 BCE, there was widespread burning and destruction, after which Kura-Araxes pottery appeared in the area. Settlements. Archaeological evidence of inhabitants of the Kura-Araxes culture had shown that ancient settlements were found along the Razdan River, as shown by drawings at a mountainous area in a cave nearby. Structures within settlements have not revealed much differentiation, nor was there much difference in size or character between settlements. Facts that suggest they probably had a poorly developed social hierarchy for at least a significant stretch of their history. Some, but not all, settlements were surrounded by stone walls. They built mud brick houses, originally round, but later developing into sub-rectangular designs with structures of just one or two rooms. Multiple rooms centered around an open space, or rectilinear designs. At some point the culture's settlements and burial grounds expanded out of lowland river valleys and into highland areas, although some scholars have suggested that this expansion demonstrates a switch from agriculture to pastoralism, and that it serves as possible proof of a large-scale arrival of Indo-Europeans. Facts such as that settlement in the lowlands remained more or less continuous suggest merely that the people of this culture were diversifying their economy to encompass both crop and livestock agriculture. Shengavit settlement is a prominent Kura-Araxes site in present-day Yerevan area in Armenia. It was inhabited from approximately 3200 BC Cal to 2500 BC Cal. Later on, in the Middle Bronze Age, it was reused irregularly until 2200 BC Cal. The town occupied an area of 6 hectares, which is rather large for Kura Araxes sites. Kura Araxes mounds in the 3rd millennium BC. One particular group of mounds of the Kura Araxes culture is remarkable for their wealth. This was the final stage of culture's development. These burial mounds are known as the Matopi period mounds. Those on the left bank of the river Alazani are often 20 to 25 meter high and 200 to 300 meter in diameter. They contain especially rich artifacts, such as gold and silver jewelry. Economy. The economy was based on farming and livestock raising. They grew grain and various orchard crops, and are known to have used implements to make flour. They raised cattle, sheep, goats, dogs, and in its later phases, horses. Prior to Kura Araxes period, horse bones were not found in Transcaucasia, but later, beginning about 3300 BCE, they became rather widespread, with signs of domestication. There is evidence of trade with Mesopotamia, as well as Asia Minor. It is, however, considered above all to be indigenous to the Caucasus, and its major variants characterized later major cultures in the region. Metallurgy. In the earliest phase of the Kura Araxes culture, metal was scarce. In comparison, the preceding Lala Tepe culture's metalwork tradition was far more sophisticated, but the Kura Araxes culture will later display a precocious metallurgical development, which strongly influenced surrounding regions. They worked copper, arsenic, silver, gold, tin, and bronze. Their metal goods were widely distributed, from the Volga, Dnieper and Don Donets river systems in the north to Syria and Palestine in the south and Anatolia in the west. Their pottery was distinctive. In fact, the spread of their pottery along trade routes into surrounding cultures was much more impressive than any of their achievements domestically. It was painted black and red, using geometric designs for ornamentation. Examples have been found as far south as Syria and Israel, and as far north as Dagestan and Chechnya. The spread of this pottery, along with archaeological evidence of invasions, suggests that the Kura Araxes people may have spread outward from their original homes, and most certainly had extensive trade contacts. J. Makar believes that its southern expanse is attributable primarily to Mitanni and the Hurons. They are also remarkable for the production of wheeled vehicles, which were sometimes included in burial kurgans. Viticulture and wine-making were widely practiced in the area from the earliest times. Viticulture even goes back to the earlier Shulaviri Shomu culture. The earliest evidence of domesticated grapes in the world has been found at Gadakrili Gora, near the village of Imiri, Marnula municipality, in southeastern Republic of Georgia. Carbon dating points to the date of about 6000 BC. Grape pips dating back to the V4th millennia BC were also found in Shulaviri. Others dating back to the 4th millennium BC were found in Keys and Aunt Gora, all in this same Shulaviri area of the Republic of Georgia. A theory has been suggested by Stephen Bashik that the Kura Araxes folk may have spread Vitis vinifera vine and wine technology to the Fertile Crescent, to Mesopotamia and the Eastern Mediterranean. The spread of wine goblet form, such as represented by the curb at Kerik ware, is clearly associated with these peoples. The same applies to the large ceramic vessels used for grape fermentation. Culture. The culture is closely linked to the approximately contemporaneous Makop culture of Ciscaucasia. As Amjad J. Makar puts it, the Kura Araxes culture was contiguous, and had mutual influences, with the Makop culture in the northwest Caucasus. According to E.I. Krupnov, there were elements of the Makop culture in the early memorials of Chechnya and Ingushetia in the Mekhan and Bamit kurgans and in Lugovo in Sergenuit. Similarities between some features and objects of the Makop and Kura Araxes cultures, such as large square graves, The bold relief curvilinear ornamentation of pottery, ochre-colored ceramics, earthen hearth props with horn projections, flint arrowheads, stone axes and copper pitchforks are indicative of a cultural unity that pervaded the Caucasus in the Neolithic age. Inhumation practices are mixed. Flat graves are found, but so are substantial kurgan burials, the latter of which may be surrounded by cromlechs. This points to a heterogeneous ethno-linguistic population. Late in the history of this culture, its people built kurgans of greatly varying sizes, containing greatly varying amounts and types of metalwork, with larger, wealthier kurgans surrounded by smaller kurgans containing less wealth. This trend suggests the eventual emergence of a marked social hierarchy. Their practice of storing relatively great wealth in burial kurgans was probably a cultural influence from the more ancient civilizations of the Fertile Crescent to the south. According to Giulio Palambi, the typical red-black wear of Kura Araxes culture actually originated in eastern Anatolia, and then moved on to the Caucasus area. But then these cultural influences came back to Anatolia mixed in with various other cultural elements from the Caucasus. Ethnolinguistic makeup. Huron and Urartian elements are quite probable, as are Northeast Caucasian ones. Some authors subsume Hurons and Urartians under Northeast Caucasian as well as part of the Alarodian theory. The presence of Kartvelian languages was also highly probable. Influences of Semitic languages and Indo-European languages are also highly possible, though the presence of the languages on the lands of the Kura Araxes culture is more controversial. In the Armenian hypothesis of Indo-European origins, this culture is identified with the speakers of the Anatolian languages.